G'day and welcome to David Joshua Ford Live, episode 36 we're up to as we come towards the end of the year. And today I'm in Bridgehampton in New York and I'm live streaming on a YOLO Live. Hopefully this all works out today. I'm going to take you back and look at some of the live streams I've done over this year, because my goal for this year was to do one live stream every week. And I haven't succeeded in that, but I did get a fair amount of the way into that. So I want to take a look at some of the challenges of live streaming and the difference between doing it in the studio and doing it on the road. And today we are on the road out in the Hamptons, so I figured I would try and squeeze a live stream in here. If you're in the chat, drop a note and say hi. Let me know where you're joining from, and it'd be great to hear from you as we go along. I am, we'll start with where I am. I'm in the Hamptons. So if we click over here, get a little Google preview as we zoom into the US, into Long Island, all the way down. Topping Rose House is where we are. Nice little zoom around here. Just getting a look at Long Island. Just to give you a sense of where we are live streaming to you in the world from. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. And we can spin around. So we are a little bit further away from home. So essentially, that is where I am. And I am going to show you some of the things that I'm going to go into my YouTubing account here. Let's take a look. And we'll do an annual recap of a scorecard of how I did. And I've lost my picture-in-picture here, so give me 1 second. I'm just going to build my picture-in-picture again. All right, hopefully that will pull up here. Okay. All right, so looking back at my lives here, when do we start? DJF episode 1 in January wasn't too bad. I had several weeks in the studio. Views were low, and then I think around about episode 7, that's where I did this live streaming rack, which is one of the more popular ones this year, and views picked up a bit there. And in the studio, different sort of lighting things. I've always tried to like mix up the lighting and sort of the layout of the studio, which is a bit of a challenge too, because it adds time to the preparation, and the more time you have to put into preparing to live stream, the less likely you are to go live, as I will talk about today. Okay, and then getting closer to, what are we, episode 13, 14, 16, 17. These are all pretty good. And then I did some PTZ things, and most of this has been around Companion, but there's also been some on the PTZs and the Stream Deck pedal and the Stream Deck itself, obviously. And then around August, did a bit of traveling with the YOLO box, and I'll show you my setup here. And the challenges that I had with the YOLO box weren't even the YOLO box. I think it's just environmental, of like when you're in a hotel like this one, and this one seems to have good internet of 30 up and 30 down. But I had a couple of failed live streams. This one from Tarrytown, which I unlisted, because the internet crashed or something like that. There wasn't very stable, and I think something to do with the permissions blocked out the YOLO box. And then I tried to do one in Sanibel Island in Florida, and that also had problems. So there's a couple of failed live streams there, and then some of the more recent ones have been in the studio, which is much easier because everything's laid out, and also you don't get interrupted. So like on today's live stream, I was, there's this beautiful hall, and I was all set up, ready to go, and then they turned on music, and there was like people who came into work, and it just like the space wasn't conducive to doing a live stream. And so then I went into a yoga studio, which was gorgeous and had beautiful sunlight, and it was like a really interesting spot to live stream from. And then just before I was about to schedule the stream, a whole band rocks in and they're setting up for an event and that kind of stuff. So trying to control the parameters of your live stream can be quite challenging when you're outside of your studio. Not to mention you've got to like manage other things like internet and power. So let's take a quick look at how I'm running today's live stream, because if everything is going smoothly, then that's a win, because today we're running 100% on Wi-Fi and 100% on battery, which is not my preferred mode, but when I'm traveling, I don't want to carry mounds of gear on a, it's between Christmas and New Year's here, so we're trying to relax and have a good time. A couple of g'days in the chat. Emmanuel, good to see you here from Cape Verde in West Africa, and Peter as well from Edinburgh in Scotland. Thanks for joining, and get rid of that comment there. Okay, so let's switch across here, and I will give you my my view of what is going on my end of things. So I'm really just running this with 3 devices. I've got my Mac, I've got my YOLObox Pro, and then I've got my R5C in the corner on a tripod. And then I've also got my iPhone that you're looking at here, and I'm plugged in via the USB connection, and that's giving me a solid video out here. And so I can just pull up a different view and explain what is going on. So the YOLObox sitting in front of me on the desk, running on battery. I'm about 85% here after doing a bit of testing and stuff. So I'm feeling pretty good about the amount of juice we have left in that. And on my Mac as well, I've got 72%. So I'm feeling pretty good with that. And there's a bird outside. Okay. Yes, and so then we have a little garden out here. I was going to do this live stream outside in the garden, but it's also like basically the main road out to Montauk here. So there's a ton of trucks and stuff like that. So it's always trying to balance up, the picture versus the audio. And I would say the audio probably has to win out most of the time. Back to what we have here. So essentially I've got my HDMI 1 is coming from the camera. So I've just got a long HDMI micro to full HDMI here. And then I've got a short cable going from the Mac. So that's kind of my desktop display. At the moment, I'm just full screen with this iPhone connection. And then I've got, you would have seen in previous videos, the microphone. This one is the Sennheiser XS, I think, something like that. That's a USB-C microphone, so I can plug it into the USB-C of the YOLObox Pro. I could also plug it into, I guess, an Android phone, maybe an iPhone next year, we'll see, and into a Mac computer to get USB audio. And in my test that I did in the previous live stream, the reason I went with this one was it was just a little bit more diverse than the 3.5mm plug, because I can plug it in these different devices, and I feel like we're going more towards USB-C than 3.5mm plugs. And the other thing was it didn't quite have the same boost. So some of the other microphones for the YOLObox that had a lower, like a 3.5mm plug, their line level wasn't enough. So that's where I've used this microphone, even though it doesn't quite have the same, the YOLObox processes it differently, so it probably doesn't have the same noise cancelling, but hopefully is clear. It's not the world's greatest microphone, but when you're live streaming and you want to carry everything in a backpack, that's the way I was approaching that here. And then this last one is an extension cable here, which is just coming around the back, and then I think it's down on the floor here. So I've just got my monitor plugged into this extension cable, and then in my ear I've got an in-ear monitor. It's probably about $50 or so, and it just kind of means I don't have to wear a huge headset of just to make sure that my audio is coming through. And I am hearing my audio. I do have a slight delay on that, which is a little disconcerting, but hopefully my lips are in sync. So tell me how we're going. Yeah. So, and then the last thing is, let me just get this the right way around, is this FX Lion battery. This is a V-mount one. what I love about this is it has 98 watt hours, so plenty of capacity, small and compact, easy to travel with. And then there's a USB-C out that will run at like 20 volts, but it's also PD, like power delivery. So this is powering the R5C, which otherwise would die within about 5 minutes because the internal batteries for the R5C in video mode are not great. And then I've also got this USB connection, which I can either power up the YOLObox Pro or the computer, but I've unplugged it at the moment because I just want to make sure I have enough juice for the camera because the other devices are looking good. And we're running about halfway here. So that's kind of the setup that I'm running, and I am pleased to say that it seems like it's working, because in previous attempts at this, it failed. And as I was showing you there, back in August, I had a couple of live streams that I was trying to get on air and it didn't work. Peter thought I had a new earring. I guess it does kind of, it sits down on the edge. It's always a little bit of a challenge to kind of get it in the right spot, because it can kind of like, the back side of it, I'm going to take this off. Let me see, got to find the clip. There we go. So the back side of it has a clip here, and so that's clipped on my shirt, and then this one's going down the back. And then there's so basically the actual speaker is here on the back, and then this is just a tube that is going into my ear. So there's not actually any driver that's sitting in my ear. That's how it can kind of be lower profile. But yeah, placing that is sometimes difficult. I think you often see newsreaders who have that little bit of like coil that's sitting out. Let's get this plugged in here. Okay, there we go. It's not perfect, but I do prefer it to just having like massive cans. And the same thing with, I've never quite gotten into sort of the podcaster mic, just because I feel like it takes up a lot of space, and I'd rather just have the appearance of chatting to you, even though I'm just, talking to a camera and to chat. So yeah, let me just make sure I turn on the other thing I have here is I have a live streaming mode, focus. There we go, just to make sure I don't get any calls that come through, and I realized I did not have that connected. Okay, where are we? Back up to Jason, watching from London in the UK. Good to have you. And wondering if there are any planned updates for the Stream Deck buttons. So if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that I, on my website, have a bunch of both free and paid Stream Deck controls, and I am actively building that. There's a bunch of stuff that I'm waiting for in version 3 of Companion to come out, because there's certain functions that I need enabled. And some modules like the A10 module are working, they're all good. But then there's other modules like VLC or like the Canon PTZ cameras that I run that they haven't been updated yet. So it's been difficult for me to create a full profile, because it's I'm having some functions work and not others. So it is in the works. I've also got a 2ME Constellation profile that is in the works, and again, I'm just waiting on some of the developer stuff on GitHub to get a little bit further along, partly with like things with like the A10 Mini Pro. There's only 4 inputs and 1 output, so the matrix of that is not so bad when you've got a 32-button Stream Deck. But with the 2ME Constellation, we've now got 20 in and 12 out, and I mean, I don't even have the 4ME, but that's 40 and 24 or something like that. So it needs a whole different way of building the buttons to be based on variables, rather than pages and pages and pages and pages of individual buttons per input and output, because it's not manageable, can't service it, can't update it. So there's some of the challenges that are going on there. At some point I will update the VLC within the packages. It's a very manual process, and I've been wanting some of those other things to sort of go into the update. So that's kind of the gist of it. G'day Jesse from California. Good to have you here. I guess it's just gone afternoon for you. Yeah. Emmanuel had the same thought, that it was an earring. I never have hidden that yet out of the way. Could be. Maybe it'll be like a little plastic earring. Sound is good as well as lip sync. Excellent. That's good. I took a punt at 4 milliseconds? Let me see here. I'm always hesitant with the YOLO box when I'm scrolling through things because I feel like I'm going to touch things. USB audio. Okay, well, it's good that it's, because at the moment I've got it set to 0, and normally I've boosted that up. Let me see if I can bring my screen back up here. So this is what it's looking like. So you'll see the USB audio is plugged in here. I can boost it up to 30 decibel, which probably is not amazing. And I'm just monitoring it off this green thing. So if I was to project more and to speak more strongly, then I'm still not quite hitting the yellow. So maybe I could like boost it up just a little bit. And you're gonna have a lot more background noise. So tell me if I should boost that, pull that out. It's difficult with this earpiece. And then I've got about 8 milliseconds that I've dialed in with the delay. It's a bit difficult to dial that in easily because it goes very quickly. I'm guessing it's around about there. So let me go back to the comments. Peter would like to know, could you use that in-ear as a solution for remote talkback? I mean, you could. It's really just an in-ear speaker, and I think like I was showing you, if I can pull up this again, I could even unplug it. Let me have a look. All right, so I'm gonna come back to this one. Okay, so my hand in the way. So if I unplug this, then all that's changed here is I can't hear myself. But essentially, this is just a 3.5 mil mono, and then I've got a stereo one that's plugged in here, and that seems to bring the channels through. Forgive me while I have to put my camera down to be able to plug that back in. But yeah, that's essentially all it is. So you could plug this into any audio output, and that is how it is being in ear. And so the talkback function is really just dependent on other hardware, not this actual, yeah. Just to clarify, as in if you had a pitch side presenter who needed to be able to hear if they were live. Yeah, I mean, people who are on air use this sort of stuff all the time because it's, and I think particularly if you're live streaming on your own, you need to hear it. Like, I would love to turn this off, but because there's no one else here to like do quality check, if for some reason I bump this and like there's no audio coming through, then other than me like monitoring the comments and a minute later being like, okay, no one can hear anything, then I wouldn't have any way of knowing that the audio is in there. But it's not ideal because of the latency that I've gotten here. So I'm having to fight that a bit in terms of like ignoring the person speaking to me in my ear who is 8 milliseconds behind. What I could do is I could go down and turn down the monitor. So now it's just like lower, and then I can still kind of hear a little my voice in the background, and it's not bothering me so much. Yeah. Jason, great question. What are you more excited about, or most excited about in Companion 3? There are so many things. I think I'm most excited about the multiple emulators. That's probably the number one thing, because it really opens up another device. So whereas you really needed a Stream Deck, XL is what I've been using because it's got the most buttons on it. With version 3, you're going to be able to just like spin up emulators. You could have, and I've shown this on the last episode, I think it was. Anyway, if you go back and have a look, I was actually doing a demonstration of how this works, and you could have 3 different people with 3 different iPads, and they have their independent control over it. So I think that's really progressed Companion to a place where it's very useful across the network for multiple people to be able to use it, and also to just sort of spin up surfaces that don't really cost anything, in the sense of like that a lot of people already have a laptop or a tablet or a phone or that kind of stuff. And if you're in a pinch, you need to, like the example I had was, I was doing a show where I had created a page for the graphics person to fire in all the cues, and I was going to give them like a whole Stream Deck, but then I was able to give them just like a web page, and they could go in and execute that. So that for me, with my switching, I could have 2 Stream Decks in front of me and have the actual physical control. So I mean, I didn't have to like buy a 3rd Stream Deck. So that's pretty cool. There's also talk of, this is probably down the line a bit, of getting away from the 8x4 grid. So it would be sort of a user determined number of rows and columns, and that could open up things like vertical layouts. So you could kind of build something for your phone. I think that would be really powerful too, to have a version of Companion and the layout that is just, it's built for the phone, and you don't have to turn it like this to be able to operate it. So you can kind of run around a venue and make changes with one hand rather than, you know, 2-hand type thing. And what else? I think they're probably the main things. And then there's a bunch of other like ATEM module developments that have been really cool in terms of variables, and props to Julian Waller, who's been developing that, and he's doing really great work. And I think there's more to come too. The other big thing that Julian's done with Companion is create the long presses. So for me, that is going to simplify some of the builds. Previously, for a long press to work, it had to reference the short press of a button on another page. And so there's a lot of like cross-referencing and just pages that had to exist even though you would never press on them. So that can exist within a single button now. So that's going to make it easier to build and manage and deploy and to edit. And there's one other thing. I'm trying to remember now. And there's rotaries. There's a lot coming, so stick around. It's going to be good. Okay. Question: is ATEM Constellation HD 2ME and Wirecast a good combination? As I've learned from one of your videos, the ATEM is not live stream capable. So if you start with the ATEM Minis, there's ATEM Mini Pro and the ATEM Extreme, they have an encoder built in. So all in one device, you can be switching, you can output video, and you can encode the program video and output that over USB-C into something else or directly to the web. When you step up to the 2ME Constellation, that's really just a 1U rack video switcher. So you've got 20 inputs and 12 outputs. And so the idea is you're going to take one of those outputs via SDI and you're going to feed it into a dedicated Web Presenter HD or 4K. That's another $500, $600 for a separate device, its own power, video in, and another SDI out back into your 2ME if you want to put it into the multi-view to be able to like monitor the health of that stream. So even though on the Constellation you have 20 inputs, there's a chance that a number of those inputs are going to be taken up by functional type things like monitoring the stream, or maybe you bring in an auto cue or graphics and that kind of stuff. So you might not actually have 20 inputs available for your disposal to just, you know, throw up more cameras. So that's something to consider. And I do think the ATEM Extreme is probably still my favorite device in terms of a ton of power and capability, being able to record in the unit, stream, switch, output. The ATEM Extreme SDI with the 4 outputs. I love that one. That's like the best one. I just got the 2ME because I need some more inputs for some of the shows I've been doing. But for most things, I think Extreme would be good. I haven't used Wirecast. I played around with it years ago, and the layout of the interface never made sense to me. I don't know. It was too much of a learning curve. This is probably, 2016 or something. So maybe it's changed since then. And then I sort of got into the ATEMs, and now I kind of have an ecosystem where it's sort of ATEMs because they are network based and I can connect them to Companion. And so it's not just about connecting it to Companion, it's about Companion being the hub which can control multiple things. So like when I'm doing, and I'm hoping that YOLO Live open up their API so that Companion can control it. But at the moment, it's very much me looking down and like reading things like this. And I would love to be able to build the YOLO box into Companion, because I don't actually need a Stream Deck to run Companion. I can be running it on my Mac. I think I'm always going to need a computer for live streaming because of like playing in graphics or just, monitoring the back end of YouTube and that kind of stuff. So I'm always going to have a computer there for tasks. And being able to run Companion on that will just kind of centralize that. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't speak to Wirecast as much, but I've enjoyed using the ATEMs. All right, we've got, let me see here. Jesse says he's a bit behind the time, literally. It's noon here now. But also with the Stream Deck Plus, how is that with Companion? I really want to get one to help mix my church's XR18 and not sure how well it works. I think it would work. Like there's been a lot of development with the Stream Deck Plus. I haven't bought one because it seems very, kind of seems niche to a very solo live streamer, or like someone who's going to customize their usage of it for them, and a lot of what I've tried to do here is build a platform that anyone can use, so that there's a lot of things that are pre-built in the packages that I put together, and then you can copy and paste that into your own kind of like homepage. Whereas with Stream Deck Plus, there's just fewer buttons. You've only got 8 buttons, and then you've got the strip and the 4 dials. So I think if it had, 32 buttons or 128 buttons and like 16 dials across the top, that kind of thing would be more interesting to me, because then for something like, an XR18 or whatever, you could build out audio channels and just like have that accessible. If you've only got a couple of main audio channels, then that might work. But yeah, I would say if you've got the money and you want to play with it and the time to play with it too, then you could look into that. You could also, you can kind of do a test run without buying it, I guess, and just sort of do it online on the web. But yeah, I think it was just because it's only got 4 dials. That's the reason why I haven't fully embraced it. I may do, but like there's a dog in the yard. I was gonna say I embraced the pedal because I found a use for it, even though there's only 3 buttons, and I was able to turn it into 6 with a long press. I found a use for it in the queue that I've built, in terms of being able to create a run of show with 24 buttons that will automatically update. So you can just hit the button and it'll progress to the next one. So when you see me in my studio, often what I'm doing is I actually have my foot on a pedal, and so I can just chat to you with my hands and keep my eyes on the confidence monitor, which is in teleprompter, and my foot will be progressing the camera moves or graphics and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I use that. Jesse also says, did you make any changes to your live stream rig attached to a camera setup? I think you're referencing the ATEM Mini rig that I did, probably about 2 years ago now, a year and a half. I grew, I guess, so that rig got re-rigged and changed around, and I would sometimes put more devices onto it, sometimes less. And eventually I got the Extreme, and that's not a on-camera device. But a lot of the the powering options, like it's still a 12-volt system, the Extreme. It just needs more amperage. So the powering systems, the converters from like a 12-volt to a 5-volt USB, and the router and the switches and all that kind of stuff, that kind of migrated with me, and then I upgraded. So I found it to be like something that could be used in different ways and repurposed, And then even when I got the 2ME and I've gotten rid of the Extreme HDMI version, and now I've got the SDI version, the same sort of router, same version of the switch, but I got like a bigger one with more power and just needed a lot more in and outputs of that. So yeah, what I liked about that was it was quite adaptable, and it wasn't like you just built it and then you can't use those parts again. I'm still using it for other things and rigging and stuff like that. So yeah, he said, what's yes, where you basically strapped it to a camera. What's your favorite rig to use right now, portable or in the studio? My favorite live streaming setup is my studio rig, probably because it's all there. I have a quiet space, so I'm not going to get interrupted like I did today when I was about to go live, and there was a whole events company coming to set up in the space. And so you can control the audio. And I think it's also like one of the challenges I was talking about with live streaming is like every time you change something, then you have to, it's just more time to like reconfigure the setup. So if mostly my desk is sort of on the side because that's how I like to use the space. And then sometimes I like to have the desk square, so I'm front on, kind of like how I am with you now. And the challenge of that is that I have to move the camera, and the cables move, and re-rig it, and then the camera's in the middle of the studio, and so I probably need to do that for a couple of days, and then I've got shoots that I need to like work around it. All of that takes time, and there's just only so much time in a week to get things done. So as much as possible, and this is where my cue system that I've been developing is really important, because it means I can replicate things with a press of a button. So I have a pre-show button, as I've showed you before, which will get like cameras, the PTZ cameras, into the first positions, and it'll put the right ones in the program, and it'll start the music, and it'll do the graphics and the countdown, all that kind of stuff. So it's like my first cue. And then when it's top of the hour and it's time to go live, with my pedal, I can actually press the next cue, which I've called run. And then that will start the slow zoom in, and it'll bring the camera onto program, and it'll unmute my microphone so that I can, don't have to worry about that before I go on air. So it makes it very smooth, and it takes a lot of the thinking away from it, so that I can just focus on trying to be present, trying to like smile before I come on, so that I'm not like, oh, hi, like that kind of thing. So like that's been important for me. And just trying to replicate that each week so I can grow by adding things to it. Like I think next year, I've got a couple more lights now, some Amaran colored lights that I'm testing out. So I want to try some different lighting effects. I want to take another look at graphics. I feel like I could do a lot more with graphics, and I want to find a system that's just like very easy to update, so that it's not like needing, like if you do a 1 hour live stream, that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of there's a couple hours of prep of just getting things ready. So the most that you can do to minimize the prep time and make things automated and repeatable means that I could achieve my goal of going live once a week every time this year. And I've gotten, I'm guessing, about 70% of the way there. Yeah. Okay, Emmanuel says, will you be upgrading the companion ATEM Stream Deck version 3.1 to reflect the 4 outputs on the ATEM SDI? I am, but I'm in the middle of developing the 2ME version, and there's some stuff in that is going to make the Extreme much more flexible and powerful. So basically what that is a bunch of, we're basically on a highway here. It's like the highway that goes out to Montauk. So there's a lot of trucks and stuff. What was I going to say? Variables, like I was saying before, it is having variables in the switching of the program, the preview, the auxiliary out, and being able to build that into a single button that's not referencing like cascading pages. And it's just going to give, the advantage is I want to build a page which is like, this is the switcher page for this switcher. And if you've got 20 inputs or 8 inputs or whatever, but maybe you're only switching 5 of them, you know, you've got like 3 cameras and you've got a video playback and then you've got some other computer monitor or something, you can copy those buttons to the home page. And then from there, you have a very simple switcher that with one other button press, you can switch between a preview or a program switching mode and also an auxiliary switching mode. So that's kind of where I'm wanting to get that to. At the moment, with the current version of the ATEM, to build out the extra 2 of them, I need like 2 more pages, and I could do that. It's just a lot of manual page building for something that I'm going to eventually scrap anyway. So that's kind of the gist of that. Yeah. Let me see what else I got here. All right, we could talk about 2023. I've got a couple more minutes left before we wrap up here. I've really enjoyed this year of trying to set myself the challenge of going live once a week. It's been a good sort of reps, you know, like I was showing you in my YouTube account before. In August with traveling and trying to get like a, you know, just a quiet space with good internet connection can be a challenge when you're live streaming. It's like live streaming, a whole nother game above like photography, because photography you don't have to worry about audio. You can kind of control a single point in time, but live streaming, you need like good internet for an hour and you need to be able to control the background and the light and all that kind of stuff. And that needs to not change. You know, I can already see on this shot my lighting is starting to change from the day is shifting, but I can't get up and adjust that on this camera. So yes, I would give myself a B+ for 2022 in terms of live streaming consistency, and there's certainly been a lot of things behind the scenes that I've been working on. One of the other challenges is just like my Q profile that I was talking about. Like that's something where it's like so close to putting it out there, but there's a couple of things that haven't been developed in Companion that I need for it, you know, particularly around YouTube chapter automated markers. So the other thing with that queue is that like every time I hit a comment button, it'll tag it as a comment and that kind of stuff, and it'll give me a spreadsheet sort of spit out that I can copy and paste into the YouTube comments so that it'll create the chapters, rather than having to manually go back through a YouTube episode and try and find each subject so that people can find it more after a stream. So some of those things are just like I'm almost ready to like get that out there for a live stream, and then there'll be something that's not quite ready. So some of that content development has been a challenge. I don't know if I'll get there, but I would like in 2023 to do more of an interview style show and have preferably like people come into the studio and I can chat and we can find out about their creative process. That's something that's interesting to me. It's probably just the amount of time that takes to produce that on the back end and to do that consistently. But I'd love to hear from you guys and girls to know what you're interested in. Most of my stuff seems to be around Companion, so we can keep kind of doing that. But I also do photography and video, business, producing, all sorts of things. So if there's other topics that you want to hear about, do drop that in the chat and I will think about that, because that does help me kind of think about like what to talk about next. And there's a couple of other YouTube comments that I've had over previous weeks. I got one about like routers recently, and so I'm hoping to do a show about that. So it can help develop the content of what I'm talking about. So let me know. The things that I'm excited about are Companion version 3 coming out. Excited to do more with like PTZ cameras and just some of their programming and control. A bit more in lighting and just getting some of those things automated into a show. Jesse says, who would you interview? It's a great question, Jesse. I don't know. I could find some of my creative friends around New York, from like artists to photographers to filmmakers to like that kind of thing. I did a podcast a little bit like that where I was interviewing feature filmmaker directors years back, and I really enjoyed that, and I found that very satisfying. It just the producing side of that took a lot of time and wasn't sustainable. But yeah, that kind of like podcast thing, I think particularly because I've got that sort of studio space and the PTZ cameras, I can visualize a podcast chat interview type show using the PTZ cameras, because I think a lot of that can be automated. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, when it comes to time and producing is the editing side of things. And one of the advantages of live streaming is that if you can cut it as you go, as opposed to pre-recording and then doing an edit, then that speeds up the actual process of like repurposing material. So if you did like an hour-long chat with a creative about their process and what they're interested in and their view on the world and that kind of stuff, there's going to be 3 or 4 nuggets within that are really great. And that's where pulling sort of YouTube shorts out of that, or pulling out maybe like 1 minute to 3 minute type excerpts where they're talking about something in particular, could be interesting, just to, talking about life. And we're all sort of doing the creative arts because we want to sort of express and understand the world, process the world. So that's something I'm sort of curious to try out more. So yeah, if there's topics and people that you're interested in, let me know. But it's a good question. Like I said, the challenge is often just the amount of time it takes to produce that. So if anyone wants to be a producer on the back end, let me know. All right, what are we up to? 3:30. We're about at time. I've got to go jump on another call. I'll make sure I've got all the comments done. Yeah. I don't have any play out music because I don't have my cues. Normally in the show, this is where I would hit on Companion and it would play the music and all that kind of stuff. So, Yellow Box, I know you're listening. So something that you need to develop into this is Companion API, so that we can control some of the cues here. So I could have like an outro that would play rather than just sort of going, what am I going to cut to? I need to cut to something. We'll go back to my splash page, which was a photo that I took on my iPhone, and then I just sort of dumped across to the Yellow Box of Topping Rose House, which is a nice little hotel, B&B, out here in Bridgehampton. And that can be our graphic to play us out. Thanks for joining this impromptu live stream. It seems like it all went pretty well with the audio and the internet. I had 30 megabytes up and down, so I was feeling pretty confident that we could get this one away on Wi-Fi today. When I get back to New York, I'm going to do an episode in the studio answering someone's questions from YouTube. They had a question about the routers that I use and the setup of that and the networking settings. So that will probably be the next episode when I next get back there. And I will see you back in New York. All right. Thanks for joining.